Hello, my name is Michael Slobodnik and I'm a solution consultant with ServiceNow. That's part of our App Engine team. Today I'm going to take you through how to quickly build applications on the ServiceNow no-code, low-code platform. And today we're going to be using the use case of how to manage Rust for vessels in the U.S. Navy. To begin with, the one thing I want to be able to let you know is that we're going to be starting from an Excel spreadsheet that I already have available where I pulled off several naval submarines or naval vessels and put it into this wonderful spreadsheet here that I got off the internet. And so we're going to be starting with this existing data in Excel and creating an application from it. So the first thing in ServiceNow world where we're going to build this application is being able to get to our studio. The studio is the piece of ServiceNow where we can go through and build all applications. So I'm going to go ahead and create a new application. I'll call it Submarine Rust Management. And you'll see that one thing that we have down here is what's called a scope. And the scope is ServiceNow's way of being able to identify all the files for an application. That way, anytime there's a platform upgrade, we know exactly which files were created by customers, and that way we don't touch them. We also have the ability to create various roles, so we can either use existing roles or we can go ahead and create new roles. So as a secure role-based platform, we've got a lot of flexibility with our security. Now, we have different experiences available. So we have a standard classic UI that does forms and lists, but we also have our native mobile application as well that we can build for this. Now, it's not what you think of a traditional for mobile development, but it's building a native mobile application that ServiceNow has that can go through and show these mobile applications, and we'll show some of that. Once we go ahead and set that information up, we now have the ability to start creating our tables. Now, with the tables themselves, we can go ahead and start with even uploading a spreadsheet. So here I'm able to take existing data that I have and save myself some time. I don't have to go through and put in all the fields in the table and everything. I can simply go through and say, you know what, I've got this Excel spreadsheet on my desktop. I want to go through and use it. I also want to include it importing the data. And ServiceNow will take that data, parse through it all, set the appropriate fields, and then go and have it all uploaded for my application. Now, while it's doing this as well, the other step that I have available to me is to also create fields that I may want as part of this data table. And so I can tell you that one of the fields that I want to add is maybe a flag field to go ahead and keep track if a submarine or boat is currently active. So I can go through and add a new field, and I can call that active, and I can say, you know what, it's going to be a true false. And so I've got the ability to start with some fields that are out there and then go through and add in fields that I want. Now, giving this table a name, I'm just going to call it submarines, and I've got my access set for my roles, and so I continue this. And then what ServiceNow is doing is going through and creating the database table on the platform database, creating the columns, and even setting up things like the REST endpoint for me. So it's doing all the work on the back end that traditionally with development, I'd have to go through and create all this stuff. Now I want to create one more new table, and one of the tables I want to create is just where Rust gets reported. And so in this case, I'm going to do what's known as extending a table. Now, the one thing about ServiceNow is the fact that ServiceNow is designed to manage tasks. So the central table to the ServiceNow platform is called Task, where we can always extend it to a custom application and then add additional attributes to it as well. So in this case, I want to start with my task table that has a whole bunch of fields for me, things like a task that's assigned to somebody, maybe a priority, description, and a lot of data elements, so I don't have to sit here and create all these data elements. Maybe some things that I do want to include. In addition to things like having location and short description, maybe I also want to include something like a category. So maybe I want to be able to say, you know what, if this is going to be major or minor. And I can go ahead and add some new choices. Major and minor. And I've got all my information set. And so I can go ahead and say, let's continue. Now, ServiceNow is going through And I'm going to auto number this so I can keep track of the various records that I have available to this. And what I want to go through then is finish with this, and now I have my Rust issues created. And so I can go ahead and continue this application. I'm done with my tables. I'm going to go through and now just configure the rest of my classic application, such as the name of it, what it's going to look like in my navigator, submarine rust management, and then I can go through and finish my mobile piece as well. And so what ServiceNow does is having its own native component to the platform gives us a lot of flexibility in how we want to build a mobile application. I also can make this available offline as well. So if I'm in a part of a boat or submarine that may have spotty network connection, I can still keep things offline and be able to work with it as well. So in this case, I want to go through and just maybe change the icon, maybe we'll change the color. And I've got my tables, creating this information. So ServiceNow is now just creating all the files for my application for me. And that way I've got everything together. And now that I've got the application complete, I'm now able to continue working on it as well. So here I can go through and say, hey, I've got my submarine rust management. Now if I go to my ServiceNow native application, I'll see that available on my device. Here it is. I've got it available. And so I've already got some of the basic information access to me as well, and ready to go. So, like I said before, I've got all my database tables and I can see everything here. I can also go ahead and see all the data that's been pulled into it. So there's all my submarine information. Now, one of the things that I don't have is the relationship between the submarines and the rust issues. And so one of the things I can do is take advantage of the rust issues table and take advantage of our form designer. And with the form designer, I've got the ability to modify this form. And so I can say, I want to have a state. I don't necessarily need priority, but I want to have the state. I don't need the parent. I'll get rid of configuration item, I'll get rid of active, but I'll keep who it's assigned to. I also created this category, so I can create that, put that category field on the form. Maybe I'll default it to minor at first, and I'll get rid of some of this extra stuff here with descriptions. But one of the things that I don't have yet is trying to figure out which boat does this rust report go to. And so I can go ahead and say, you know what, I want to create a brand new field. And it's going to reference an existing table. And it's going to point to the submarine. My backend will be called submarine. And then I'll point to that submarine's table. And now that I've got that field into place, I can hit save. And now ServiceNow is adding that field to the form. It's going to the database, adding the column to the database. It's also creating the relationship. So now if I go to a particular submarine right here, and maybe I bring one up, right now I see the information that I imported, but I don't see any information about those reported rust issues. Well, one of the things I can do is just change this form a little bit and configure what's known as those related lists. And from these related lists, I can go through and put in a rust issue, hit save, and now I can go ahead and have new rust issues reported. Maybe who it's going to be assigned to, maybe the name of the submarine. You can see here that it's the information for the submarine's defaulting to this crazy system ID. So what we can do now is going to our submarine table, we can make a minor tweak, and we can go and say, you know what, of all my columns that I have available to me, let me go ahead and change the hull number as the default name. So now when I go to my rust issues and I'm saying I have a particular submarine, it's now showing me the right name. So little configuration changes like that make a big difference. Here I have, and now I have all the data related to each other based upon which submarines have which issues. I also have states, so I can keep track of which rust issue is assigned to. I can assign it to somebody. I can put maybe something's work in progress, and just being able to keep track of all the tasks. Now, having that is great, but another big part of ServiceNow comes to automation. And so from our application studio here that lists all our files, we can go through and say, you know what, I want to automate some work, so I'm going to create a new flow. And with this flow, I'll say I want to create a new flow, and I'm going to call this my sub-rust issue. And now ServiceNow, we're going to use the no low code natural language workflow engine. So we can specify and say, okay, when a new Rust issue is created, I want to go ahead and kick off this flow. I can also add in some additional conditions. Maybe it's for something like the category is major or minor. I want to be specific, or I can just keep it generic. Now that I've got the triggers set up for when a Rust issue is created, I can now start to put in some actions or logic with my flow. In this case, I want to do something where the category is major. And you'll see here, I've got access to all of the data related to this particular flow itself. In this case, I'm just taking the category of the issue that created the flow. And if I'm doing something like a major issue, I'm going to go ahead and send an email out to the manager, the person who reported it. So I can go through, say, you know what, on the record that's created, this was opened by somebody, and they have a manager, someone they report to, and I want to send them an email and say, major Rust found. Also with email, I've got access to all the data elements in the email as well. So I can go through and say, you know what, on my Rust issue, I'm going to include the Rust number in my communication. So by keeping it data-driven, I'm able to be very flexible based upon what's happening. So that's, for example, using the if statement. I want to send an email, but what if I want to take some additional actions here? So I can also say, you know what, if it's going to be maybe a minor issue, so I'm just doing another branch here, I want to go ahead and assign it to somebody. So just like before, I'll say, great, if my category is minor, I got my conditions, and now I can specify what I'm going to do with this. In this case, I want to go through and update the record and assign it to somebody. So I can update my existing record, and I can go ahead and say, you know what, I want to change the assigned to somebody who's working on this. So maybe I can say Michael Slobodnik. Done. And maybe I also want to send them one email, just letting them know it's assigned to them. So once again, I can say update record. The assigned to person is now assigned, is going to be the recipient. And I go ahead and say, hey, Michael. Assigned to first name. You've got a new Rust issue done. And now I have my flow saved. But before we publish it or activate it to make it active in the system, we also want to test it. So we can take an existing record and just simply run tests on it. That way we're not having to go through the painful process of activating it, creating a Rust issue, and then seeing what happens, and then having to deactivate it and so on and so forth. We can just test it right there. We can see that it's complete. We can see emails sent out. And it's very easy to go ahead and build these workflows. There's also a lot available to the workflow. So in addition to various logics, we can go ahead and wait for, we can go ahead and do things in parallel. We can wait for a duration of time. We can even wait for something to be done. So maybe we wait for it to complete before we send another email that says it's been completed. A lot that we can do around it. Another big thing that we have available for our application is now simply just creating a report. So maybe I want to have a report available. And in it, I can say, you know what? I want to create a report against submarine table, my Rust report. I can go through and say, you know what? Let me just do a donut. And I want to do this by state. And maybe additional group by, I'll do by boat. I don't think I have a whole lot, just a couple things. And so now I've got a report readily available, and it's something that I can go through and share, maybe through PDF. I can go through and add it to a dashboard. I can also schedule it to be emailed to somebody every so often. So I got a lot of flexibility in being able to take this report and now give people visibility into the current data of what's happening right now. I can also add it to the service portal page right here, for example, so people can go and use this as a dashboard. They see all the data. Very easy to create these reports, and it's also real-time data. But now that I've got a report on here and I've got the workflow and I've got all my data information set up, the big question comes to, well, how do I manage this application now? And so we've got a few different tools available. One of the tools that we have is just connecting to source control. We can link this over into a Git repository. That way we can create a source control repository. We can commit changes to it and version it out that way. The other thing we have available to us is being able to just go to the applications that are being created or that I'm working on right now as a developer. And in that, I've got my applications that I'm currently working on. And with these applications, I can go through and say, well, I got a lot in development here, don't I? I can go through and say, well, you know what? I want to take my submarine rust management application, and I want to go through and create something that's packageable. And so in the ServiceNow world, we call that what we known as update sets. And so I've got a particular version to it. I can go through and create this as an update set that can be ready to install. I can also include demo data as well. And so once I create this application here, I can publish it either to something that can be downloaded and installed in another instance, or an instance can be connected to it and pull the application in or any of the changes. And I've got a very easy way to version this in ServiceNow, as well as put my notes within it and essentially keep track of all of the information available as I go through and work on this application. So just to kind of sum it up real quick, we're going through and learning how to manage the $3 billion a year Rust problem that the Navy has. And with this application, we created an application just simply by uploading it to Excel. We went through and modified our data sources with the table as well as the fields. ServiceNow went through and already created all the REST APIs for us for integrations. We went through and created a workflow that can keep track of any automation that takes place, as well as with other additional integrations. We also have access to any of the tasks, or we can create additional tasks that can be associated with these records. And then we even have workflow that can go through and keep track to make sure work is completed. We can have due dates, and essentially we now have full visibility into managing the Rust for the Navy, as well as automation around the tasks that need to take place. Different experiences, be it mobile or through the desktop. And essentially, we've been able to put all the data together, and now we can actually work with it as well as improve upon it. So I want to say thank you very much for your time, and I hope you found this demo insightful.